Millionaire discovers his son's babysitter celebrating her birthday alone, and the incredible aftermath will change everything. Jack Turner raced home from a grueling meeting, his mind a whirlwind of business strategies and profit margins. Outside his sleek sports car, the sun sank lower in the Austin sky, casting long shadows over his spacious neighborhood. On the surface, life was perfect. A sprawling mansion, a trophy wife, and a son who idolized him. Yet beneath this glimmering facade, Jack felt an unsettling hollowness growing wider by the day. He was a titan in the corporate world, but the real world seemed distant, almost unreal. As he swung open the door to his home, chaos greeted him. Max, his rambunctious 5-year-old, was tap dancing on the coffee table, while Emma, the babysitter, sat on the floor, an exhausted smile masking her troubled eyes. He barely acknowledged her, moving through the room like a ghost, mindlessly noting the scatter of toys and the half-eaten dinner as mundane distractions clouded his thoughts. But as he caught a glimpse of Emma's weary posture, a ripple of discomfort washed over him. Who was he really? Behind the success, he felt acutely aware of a bigger world, but reality that remained untouched by his relentless ambition. A sudden jolt coursed through him when he discovered today was Emma's birthday. The revelation struck like a lightning bolt, confronting him with the weight of his ignorance. What kind of life was he leading if he hadn't noticed the significance of a person's special day? It gnawed at him. By the time he slipped into the luxurious intimacy of his mansion, the echoes of hollow laughter from the office now mirrored in his head. Could he live this way, endlessly chasing more, yet forgetting those around him? That evening, he found himself inexplicably drawn to her cramped apartment. The small space bore witness to a stark reality. Cheap streamers, a plain cake, and one lonely figure singing "Happy Birthday" to herself. The scene sliced through Jack. Here was a woman smiling through pain, holding tightly to hope as the chorus of her own life played in stark contrast to his golden prison. The juxtaposition ignited something inside him, something long forgotten. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Fueled by an unexpected resolve, Jack decided to throw a surprise birthday party for Emma, envisioning joy sparking across her solemn face. Yet uncertainty gnawed at him. Was he acting out of compassion or guilt? Could this step break the chains of indifference he had so carefully wrapped around him? As the days approached, the weight of the gesture deepened. Setting the plans in motion required more than a lavish gathering. It called for real connection, a moment where he could confront his own mortality and privilege. On party night, laughter spilled over the walls, but as Jack observed Emma soaking in the camaraderie, he sensed the deepening pain within her. She revealed aspirations for nursing school and dreams clipped by hardships. A world of bills and stress flashing before him, shattering his one-dimensional perspective. The warmth enveloping the room couldn't mask the chill of inequality pressing against him. What if he could help her rise above her struggles? Yet bright ideas dulled as the reality that her burdens would soon collide with his world settled over him like a dark cloud. Just then, Jack's phone buzzed in his pocket, outside voices mingling with a piercing inner dialogue. Could he continue pursuing soul-numbing contracts clouded by ambition, while a life greater than his own cried out for support? The fragility of connection hung in the air waiting to unravel, throwing him into a relentless spiral of fear and urgency. The stakes rose as he stood at the precipice of a choice that would reshape both their destinies. Would he leap into the unknown, or remain shackled by the very definitions of success he had fought so hard to establish? The ground beneath his feet trembled, the path forward tangled in uncertainty, as the truth of his burgeoning relationship with Emma lay tantalizingly out of reach. Jack stood amidst the festive chaos, laughter echoing off the designer walls, while the reality of Emma's struggles loomed heavy in the air. His mind raced, teetering on the brink of self-imposed disillusion. Here was a stark reminder that genuine joy often coexisted with profound hardship, and he felt compelled to act. The twinkling lights cast a soft glow on Emma's face, but behind her smile, sadness flickered like a candle's flame in a draught. Could he help lift her burdens? Jack hesitated, a flood of internal voices challenging him. Who was he to play the savior? Yet, as he watched her engage with the other guests, the realization hit hard. He had lived most of his life shielded from struggles that defined authenticity. Instinctively, he pulled out his phone and opened Emma's contact. "Let's talk," he typed, the words liberated from a shadowy corner of his mind. The moment he hit send, it felt as though a dam had burst. The relief was palpable, but anxiety shadowed his musings. How could he broach the subject of her aspirations without frightening her? Each plan he envisioned turned more complex, more layered than he anticipated. "Jack, are you okay?" his friend Chris called out, snapping him back to the moment. Chris clapped him on the shoulder, oblivious to the internal battle raging. They exchanged small talk that felt stale compared to the weight pressing down on Jack's chest. "I need to make a difference in someone's life," he confessed suddenly, the admission slipping out before he could fully process it. Chris raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "You've done pretty well for yourself, my friend. What's this about? You weren't always this altruistic." Jack could feel irritation prick at him, but channeled it inward instead. "It's about more than success, Chris. It's about what we're leaving behind." Chris leaned back, recognizing the intensity that usually accompanied Jack's decisiveness. "All right then, Mr. Philanthropy, what are you planning? A charity event? Nonprofit training? Or is this just smoke and mirrors?" Jack's thoughts sharpened. The gravity of philanthropy was not lost on him, but he couldn't approach it haphazardly. He needed a real plan, something that integrated his business acumen without empty gestures. He felt a flicker of excitement mixed with trepidation, but one truth settled in his gut. The time had come for him to face the moral dilemma of his wealth. After parting from Chris, he found a quiet corner and opened an online course platform on his phone. Business for Good came into view. Was this the path forward? Could his next venture redefine success towards something more meaningful? It melded two worlds he had yet to integrate, his corporate prowess and Emma's aspirations. The party swirled on around him, yet he was withdrawing into a whirlwind of ideas and possibilities. He wasn't just Jack Turner, the businessman. He wanted to be something more, and perhaps Emma could be his catalyst. A vision of collaboration formed in his mind, building a small scholarship program or even partnering with her in a community project. Yet fear gnawed at him. Would he be equipped to navigate the uncharted realm of social impact? As he rejoined the others, a lingering sense of urgency sparked within him. Emma's laughter rang like a siren's call to something deeper. But this newfound clarity begged for action. Did he have the fortitude to break free from the constraints of his corporate persona and muster the courage to engage meaningfully with someone whose life diverged from his? The moment of commitment was fast approaching, a choice to be made that would either cast him deeper into the superficial fort of his success or pull him into an awakening he never knew he needed. The taste of both fear and determination swirled as he resolved to start the conversation that evening, to untangle the complexities of their lives, and perhaps, in some small way, transform them both. "Are you ready?" he whispered to himself, pacing toward Emma. The threshold of possibility lay in front of him, shimmering like the tiny lights he had passed earlier. He could feel the tide shifting. It was now or never. How she would respond could upend everything he thought he knew about success, friendship, and compassion. Would this be the breakthrough he longed for, or a misstep into realms unknown? The tension that wrapped around Jack like a tight coil only intensified as he approached Emma. Every step felt weighted with the potential to alter the very fabric of their interactions. How did one bridge the vast divide between privilege and struggle? Could he dare to step into the life she led, not just as an observer but as an ally? "Hey, Emma," he managed, his heart racing as their eyes met. The flicker of recognition that crossed her features momentarily disarmed him, and he seized that opening. "Think we could grab a quiet moment?" Her smile faltered only for a moment before she nodded, curiosity mingling with something deeper in her eyes. Jack led her to a secluded corner, away from the laughter and the glow of celebration. His pulse pounded in his ears, an urgent reminder that he was uncharted territory. "Everything all right?" she asked, her tone a mix of concern and casualness that only heightened his apprehension. "Actually, it's something I've been thinking about," he began, unsure whether to share the weight of his intentions or to keep it simple. Perhaps she'd prefer the latter. About life, what it means to really make an impact. Emma tilted her head slightly, allowing him a moment to gather his thoughts. There was an inherent vulnerability in her gaze that challenged his own sense of clarity. Was he truly prepared to explore the depths of someone else's life struggles while wrestling with the superficial achievements he'd spent years accumulating? He forged ahead, suddenly resolute. "I want to contribute to something, something real," he said, his voice steadying. "I've been wanting to talk to you about your aspirations, your art, and—" He stumbled on that word, but pressed on. "The dreams you told me about." Her expression shifted, a mixture of gratitude and caution dancing across her features. "It means a lot that you're interested, Jack, but what do you have in mind?" The gravity of the moment brought forth his latent ideas. "I've been considering starting a small scholarship or maybe even partnering on a project, something that highlights your work, your vision, but I'm not sure how to make it happen or if I'm even the right person." A silence enveloped them, thick with unspoken possibilities. Jack could feel the ground shifting beneath him. Vulnerability and excitement collided in the pit of his stomach. This was more than a business endeavor. It was a chance for connection, for genuine collaboration. Emma's eyes glimmered with hesitation. "Jack, that sounds great, but wouldn't that be a bit risky? I don't want to be a charity case." No, it's not about that." He shook his head vigorously, a growing urgency behind his words. "You're already doing incredible things. I want to support that, your vision, your work. This isn't charity. It's an investment in what you're able to create." The tension began to dissipate, but unease lingered. Would she embrace a partnership rooted in shared dreams, or would her skepticism prove a barrier? "Well, I've got a lot of ideas, Jack," she admitted, her tone softer now. "But it would take more than just funds. It requires understanding, commitment." Nodding, Jack felt something unlock inside him. This could be the chance. Foundation of something profound. If he could navigate the intricacies of their different realities. "I'm willing to learn," he insisted, pouring sincerity into his remark. "I won't pretend to know what it's like, but I can promise that I'm committed to understanding." Emma studied him, and for a fleeting moment, he could see her wall blend into her cautious hope. "What about your time, your resources? You don't just get to throw money at something and expect it to flourish on its own, Her pointed words rang with an undeniable truth, forcing him to confront his initial impulse. It was clear this wouldn't be a simple transaction, but a genuine partnership requiring emotional labor. "I'm ready to roll up my sleeves," he said with a determination that surprised even him. "I can help you craft a proposal, seek out funding, anything it takes." Suddenly, the night air felt charged with potential. Emma's skepticism began to be replaced by anticipation. Just as the prospect of collaboration surged between them, another voice pierced the air, a voice that held an authority he resisted. "Jack!" It was Chris again, beckoning him with urgency. "You've got to see this." With every fiber of his being, Jack wrestled with the impulse to ignore Chris and stay grounded in this moment. In that split second, he faced a pivotal choice. Would he abandon this emerging connection for the safety of his existing relationships, Or would he take the leap, risking everything for a venture steeped in meaning? As the clash of voices vibrated within him, the direction of his life hung precariously between self-interest and a quest for deeper significance. It was no longer just about Emma. It was about who he was becoming. And all at once, a deeper question formed in the back of his mind. How far was he truly willing to go to embrace this unpredictable new path? The answer felt tantalizingly close, yet frustratingly distant. He turned back to Emma just as Chris called out again. This time, the urgency was insistent, compelling. What could he discover about himself? And what choices were awaiting him in the shadows? Jack stood frozen, caught in the crossfire of competing priorities. The irretrievable moment with Emma hung tantalizingly in the air, but Chris's summons pulsated with its own urgency, pulling at him like a current. He could sense the weight of the decision pressing against him, a repudiation of the familiar comforts of his old life. This was no ordinary night, and he was acutely aware that every choice he made could redefine him. "Jack," Chris persisted, a tone of impatience shrouding the urgency, "you have to check this out." He hesitated, his eyes darting between the captivating spark in Emma's gaze and the promise of his friend's beckoning. The tug-of-war intensified. Stay with Emma, the catalyst for his burgeoning ambitions, or conform to the unquestioned camaraderie with Chris. "Hey, it's fine. Take your time," Emma said, her voice a soft reminder of the connection that seemed to flutter just out of reach. There was a mixture of encouragement and resignation in her tone, as if she recognized the gravity of the choice he faced. It was evident that she held her own apprehensions about his commitments, and that uncertainty was a mirror reflecting back his own. "Wait here," he said, dead set on acknowledging her presence, even as he turned to answer Chris. The briefest flash of disappointment flickered across her face, and it pierced Jack with a regret he hadn't expected. A few hurried steps brought him to Chris, who had positioned himself with a triumphant smile, clearly relishing the attention he'd garnered. "You won't believe the potential here, man," Chris said, gesturing toward a small group engaged in animated discussion by the bar. "This guy is a major player in the art scene. Investors are forming all sorts of partnerships, and you should try to leverage that." Jack nodded mechanically, aware of the path laid before him, yet yearning for something deeper than mere industry networking. The magnetic pull he felt toward Emma was a stark contrast to the superficial banter happening now, a chilling reminder of who he could easily become, the affluent insider overstepping boundaries. "What if," Jack began, testing waters that were growing murkier with indecision, "what if I use this opportunity to nurture a partnership with local talents instead? I mean, real collaboration." Chris snorted. "You think those people care about some artist's dreams? It's all about the bottom line. You know that." Those words stung. Jack turned back to glance at Emma, standing alone, her features set in quiet contemplation. Her ambition deserved a chance. His stomach knotted with the realization that these contrasting worlds were colliding, and he was at the epicenter of the impact. An idea landed, a flicker of a plan. "What if I pitch something?" he said, his voice gaining momentum. "Not just for me, but for us, a way to position Emma's work. This connection could mean more than just investors. It could create something meaningful." Chris looked at him incredulously. "Jack, you're talking about risking everything. You don't even know the first thing about the art world. You just want to play savior." With each jab Chris hurled, a fire ignited within Jack. He realized that the more Chris dismissed his intentions, the more determined he became. "Maybe that's the point," he shot back. "Maybe I need to see this world instead of just sitting behind my wall of privilege." This surprising boldness surged through him, and for the first time, he perceived Chris not as a friend, but an anchor pulling him down. Jack's heart raced as clarity began to sharpen the contours of his purpose. He was no longer just a bystander in a world dictated by wealth. He could be a conduit for something far greater. "I'm going to speak with Emma again," Jack said decisively, turning his back on the familiar for the promise of the uncharted. As he walked away from Chris, another voice echoed in his head. "What if you fail?" But the question was no longer about failure. It was about risk, growth, and the leap into collaborative unknowns. It was about understanding the depths beyond the shallow waters of financial success. Emma's gaze lifted to meet his, brightened by the raw sincerity of his intentions. This was more than a simple partnership. It was the unraveling of his former self and the birth of something richly authentic. "Can we talk?" he asked, approaching her with newfound resolve. She nodded, and the flicker of uncertainty danced in her eyes, revealing a possibility that was entirely mutual. Just as he opened his mouth to articulate the burgeoning idea in his mind, Chris's voice sliced through again, this time tinged with disbelief. "Are you really going to throw everything away for a harebrained scheme?" Jack hesitated briefly, recognizing that the moment was precarious. Would this be the definitive turning point? Would embracing this new reality mean sacrificing everything he had known? The stakes were about to shift, and he could almost taste the confrontation in the air. With it lingered the possibility of liberation. As he stood at the threshold of redefining his world, a heavier question coalesced. What was truly at stake in this pivotal divergence? Would he choose to mold his identity through the lens of collaboration, or would he reject the challenge and fall back into the familiar? Before he could respond, the question formed in his mind with clarity. Was he willing to confront the very essence of who he was to pursue a dream that was far from safe, yet intoxicatingly promising? Jack felt the room close in on him as he stepped towards Emma, the distance between them a chasm marked by expectation and hesitation. Each step felt like a declaration of freedom from his past self, a quiet rebellion against the inertia that Chris represented. "Jack, I think you're making a mistake," Chris's voice insisted, laced with a mixture of skepticism and concern. The confidence Jack had felt moments before seemed to crack under the weight of Chris's disapproval. But he pushed against the doubt, finding strength in the clarity of his desire to explore unfamiliar territory. He stopped before Emma, her uncertainty radiating from her as if she were a well of untapped potential. "I've been thinking about your work," he began, each word forcing the conviction from his core. "What if we could turn this moment into something bigger, a collaboration that reaches beyond just the art? You, me, what we both want." Her brow furrowed slightly, the flicker of hope mingled with wariness reflected in her expression. "What do you mean exactly?" she asked, her voice steady but cautious. "I want to pitch an initiative, something that showcases local artists' talents. Not just a networking opportunity for investors, but a genuine platform that nurtures creativity. You can guide me, and together we can bring genuine value rather than just another business transaction," he proposed, each syllable building a bridge toward a future he could scarcely fathom. Emma's features shifted from hesitation to intrigue. "You really think that could work?" "I mean, we're talking about a lot of unknowns here, Jack, and a lot of people don't see the value in art like we do." The challenges ahead were stark. This was not merely about musical connections or promotional cycles. It was about reshaping perceptions and cultivating a safe space for vulnerability and creativity. "I've seen the value in you," he said instinctively, drawing from the raw authenticity that had sparked his interest in her work. "I think we can convince others to see it too." In that moment, something shifted within him. The once overpowering specter of Chris's doubts began to dissipate, like morning fog yielding to a light that encouraged growth. Yet the juxtaposition of rejection and acceptance loomed in the background, the fear of failure clashing with the exhilarating potential of discovery. What if we fail? The very question Chris had posed lingered at the forefront of his mind again. But failure was an abstract concept. It only existed in the shadows of hesitation and regret. What remained visible was a chance to redefine his life and the trajectory of artists like Emma, should he choose to leap into the unknown. "I'm willing to risk it," Jack blurted, meeting Emma's eyes, willing her to see the sincerity behind his words. "Let's present our vision to that group together. Show them that a different kind of collaboration is not just possible, but necessary." The challenge unraveled before Emma, Part skepticism, part excitement danced in her gaze. "You really believe we can change minds?" "I believe we must try," he replied, his voice steady with conviction. "We owe it to ourselves to pursue something meaningful, something that could redefine how we view art in our society." Just as she opened her mouth to respond, Chris interjected once more, stepping closer and dramatically shaking his head. "You're throwing away your priorities for a whimsical dream. This is no way to salvage your career." A storm brewed inside Jack. Chris's voice, once a source of affirmation, now felt like chains locking him into a mold he despised. The class magnified as he recognized the underlying truth that he could no longer ignore. Chris was not just an anchor, he was the embodiment of the life Jack no longer wanted. "Chris, maybe you're right about the risks," Jack said, fortifying his resolve. "But maybe what's at risk is something worth fighting for." Emma looked at Jack, the connection between them growing stronger, more intoxicating in its potential. In the depths of uncertainty and challenge, a possibility lingered, a spark of ambition that could illuminate their way forward. "Let's do this," Emma finally said, and Jack felt a rush of elation coursing through him. Together, they would embrace the chaos of pursuing something authentic, leaving behind the cocoon of safety that Chris symbolized. This was about more than a project. It was about redefining the essence of who Jack could be. As they turned to face the gathered crowd, Jack could feel the gravity of the moment pressing down, a mix of hope and fear swirling within. The stakes had shifted dramatically, tangibly. What lay ahead was a new horizon in which he could finally shed the shadows of perceived security. But just as he stepped into the fray, ready to articulate their vision to the art world, a flicker of doubt crossed Emma's features, something unsettled, a thought left unspoken. "Jack," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "what if we take the first step and it leads to something even bigger than we imagined?" The question hung in the air, a tantalizing promise intertwined with a formidable challenge. Would they confront the unknown together, risking everything for a dream that could change their lives? The moment felt imbued with possibility, and it was clear their journey had just begun, and the true test of their ambitions awaited just beyond the horizon. Jack's heart thudded against his ribcage as he faced the crowd, an eclectic mix of supporters and skeptics. They were there not just to listen, but to weigh his credibility against the specter of Chris's doubts. Emma stood beside him, her presence grounding him in what felt like an electric atmosphere. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of expectation settle over him. This was a pivotal moment where every word held the potential to either build or dismantle the fragile bridge he was trying to forge. "Thank you all for gathering here today," Jack began, his voice steadier than he felt. "We're here to talk about art, not just any art, but the kind that breathes life and meaning into our community." He scanned the room, catching eyes that ranged from curious to skeptical. Each gaze was a small test of his resolve. "Emma and I believe in the transformative power of creativity. It's not merely a luxury. It is essential to who we are as individuals and as a society." Emma stepped forward, imbued with an intensity that surprised him. What if we helped expose these artists and their work to a broader audience? What if we created an atmosphere where art doesn't just exist in galleries, but floods our streets, our lives? Her passion was compelling, and Jack felt a surge of pride. Together, they presented a vision that married their dreams with the reality of the art world. It was daunting and exhilarating, shaking off the shackles of doubt that had once tethered him to the past. As they articulated their ideas, the flickering doubts in Jack's mind began to refocus into something sharper, an acknowledgement of his own capabilities, a realization that he was more than the misgivings Chris had draped over him. Why had he allowed himself to linger in that limiting mindset for so long? Mixing ambition with vulnerability felt like a significant step into unfamiliar territory, and yet it was undeniably liberating. And then he felt it, a wave of composure washing over him. This initiative is not just about showcasing art. It's about cultivating a culture that values creativity. We understand the risk involved, but isn't that what pursuing your passion often requires? The boldness to step into the unknown. As they spoke, Jack noticed the subtle shifts in the crowd's demeanor. Curiosity sparked in some eyes, while others still retained their skepticism. He realized they weren't just judging the project, they were gauging him too. Could he, Jack, a figure so ensnared in self-doubt, lead a project that challenged society's deep-rooted perceptions? In the middle of his delivery, he noticed Chris leaning against the wall, arms crossed, watching with an expression that straddled disapproval and intrigue. Their shared history loomed heavily in the air. But rather than retreating to the comfort of familiarity, Jack confronted the inner turmoil that was born from Chris's presence. It was the same turmoil that had almost derailed him just moments before, but now it ignited a fierce determination within him. What I propose today is not a fleeting idea. It's an invitation for each of you to engage in something meaningful, a rebirth of artistic expression that dares to challenge and change the narrative of our community, he said, his voice rising with passion. I invite you to be part of something bigger than ourselves. He felt Emma's glance, a mix of pride and unity, as the energy in the room shifted. They were no longer just presenting to an audience. They were building a potential coalition of support, a shared ownership of a nascent dream. He pressed on, fueled by an inner conviction that had burgeoned through his delightful partnership with Emma. The doubt that accompanied him was no longer a barrier, but a backdrop against which the brilliance of possibility could emerge. As they rolled out their ideas, Jack felt the difference within himself, a profound transformation from doubt to confidence, from paralysis to action. He envisioned not just art on display, but a living, breathing tapestry of human experience woven into the fabric of his community. But just as he reached the climax of his presentation, Chris stepped forward, breaking the momentum like a sharp turn in a conversation that had been steadily climbing. "And what happens when this dream fails, Jack?" he interjected, his tone laced with an insistence that bordered on a challenge. The question loomed, heavy and palpable, threatening to undo the groundwork they had laid. Jack faltered, the echoes of his insecurities surfacing once more, but this time he was prepared to confront them head-on. His answer wasn't just a response, it had to be a resolution. If we fail, we learn, but to not try, to not take this step, would mean we've already resigned ourselves to mediocrity. Silence enveloped the room, charged with tension. Jack faced Chris, the confrontation a showdown of ideals. This was not just about art, it was about who he was becoming, a man ready to embrace risk for a vision that resonated deeper than mere profit or approval. Emma's hand brushed against his, an affirmation of solidarity, as Jack glanced around, catching the inspired expressions creeping across the audience. Each moment felt monumental, a testament to their shared ambition, despite the uncertainty lurking in the shadows. The ground beneath him had shifted. We're in deep water now, and he would have to navigate the tides of challenge and probability that lay ahead. Let's find out what we can create together, he concluded, the promise of discovery crackling in the air. The audience's murmur indicated he was nudging them closer to a decision. It was a precarious step on the brink of hope, one that implied that whatever they chose to do next would only amplify the risks and reflections they hadn't yet confronted. Jack wanted to believe in the possibility of success, but the path ahead was littered with uncertainty at every turn. He could almost feel the ground parameters of their project dissolving into something greater as anticipation spread. Just then, he locked eyes with Emma, only to see a flicker of concern wash over her expression. "Jack," she murmured softly, "what if we try and it's too much to handle? What if the weight of expectations crushes us?" Those words hung heavily like the potential dawn breaking as new challenges emerged in their path forward. Jack realized their journey was about to change yet again, and this time it held the promise of not just redefining art, but transforming their very selves. The stakes had never felt higher, and they were just beginning to navigate the complexities of not only their project but their evolving partnership. Jack stood before the audience, the silence rich with uncertainty. The question Chris posed echoed in his mind, demanding an honest answer from within. What if the venture did crumble beneath the weight of their ambition? The fear clawed at the edges of his newfound resolve, and he could feel the tentative warmth of Emma's hand fade against the raw chill of self-doubt. Too much to handle, he whispered to himself, contemplating the breadth of the risk they were embarking on. A thought struck him, illuminating a path through the haze. Every artist embraces vulnerability in their work, exposing their deepest fears and desires. Wasn't this journey no different? To reveal his vision and open his heart fully to the possibility of failure was not merely a step back, it was a leap forward. The weight of expectations only crushes those who aren't willing to carry the burden, he stated aloud, directing the conviction toward Emma, who seemed to brighten momentarily. If we believe in what we are creating, then we can manage whatever comes next. This is our moment to grow. Jack's cadence shifted as he reflected back on times in his life where the obstacles seemed insurmountable. Each moment he'd faced so far, however daunting, had imparted invaluable lessons. He thought of his early struggles and deep-seated insecurities, those facets of his life that Chris so easily exploited. What if he flipped that narrative? What if every failure was merely a stepping stone toward development, individually and collectively? The crowd had shifted, some leaning forward in their seats, caught in the magnetic pull of his emerging courage. The doubt had morphed into an empowering force propelling him forward, and he found himself grounded by. Too much to handle, he whispered to himself, contemplating the breadth of the risk they were embarking on. A thought struck him, illuminating a path through the haze. Every artist embraces vulnerability in their work, exposing their deepest fears and desires. Wasn't this journey no different? To reveal his vision and open his heart fully to the possibility of failure was not merely a step back, it was a leap forward. The weight of expectations only crushes those who aren't willing to carry the burden, he stated aloud, directing the conviction toward Emma, who seemed to brighten momentarily. If we believe in what we are creating, then we can manage whatever comes next. This is our moment. Jack's cadence shifted as he reflected back on times in his life where the obstacles seemed insurmountable. Each moment he'd faced so far, however daunting, had imparted invaluable lessons. He thought of his early struggles and deep-seated insecurities, those facets of his life that Chris so easily exploited. What if he flipped that narrative? What if every failure was merely a stepping stone toward development, individually and collectively? The crowd had shifted, some leaning forward in their seats, caught in the magnetic pull of his emerging courage. The doubt had morphed into an empowering force, propelling him forward, and he found himself grounded by very fears he once loathed. "I won't lie, I'm scared," he acknowledged, the openness surprising even him. But maybe that's the fuel we need, an energy that can cultivate innovation, inspiration, and depth. We all have doubts. Embracing them may just inspire someone else to trust the process. The audience began to respond, murmurs circulating like ripples in water. Jack's gaze darted around the room and locked for a moment with Chris's. The challenge posed was not just an interrogation. It was an invitation to rethink the deeply ingrained notions of failure and doubt. So Jack forced himself to lean into the discomfort, direct his thoughts back toward the potential they were unleashing. As he boldly continued, Jack expanded on the ideas they had presented previously. Each concept flowed with conviction, carving out a vivid narrative of possibility that pulsated with the energy sweeping through the room. Art revitalizes, it provokes. Yes, it may fail at times, but that's how revolutions begin, he declared, feeling his words gain momentum. It's a natural part of the creative process. But if we choose to ignore our ambitions out of fear, we're denying not only ourselves, but the potential that lies within our communities. The underlying chemistry pulsed with renewed intensity. Jack felt empowered as enthusiasm surged through the crowd, causing a transformation from skepticism to intrigue. As the seminar wound down, Jack's heart raced, not from fear, but from exhilaration. Confronting his comparably weaker self had deepened his convictions and dramatically shifted his perspective. Failure is not the enemy. Stagnation is, Jack concluded, relieved to see nods of understanding ripple through the audience. The space was alive with the possibility of new beginnings, rather than the bleak specter of defeat that had overshadowed him moments ago. With Emma by his side, a silent agreement pulsing between them, Jack took a deep breath, feeling a deepening bond between their intentions. This was more than a project. It was a shared evolution, not only of their roles, but of who they were destined to become. The energy crackled as he stepped back, allowing time for the audience to digest their words. He braced himself. The real test was yet to come. Would they step forward into this shared future, or would the weight of Chris's challenge prove too daunting? Jack, Emma's voice snapped him back to the present, her eyes flickering with a blend of anxiety and excitement. What if they love it? What if this is only the beginning? Her question hung in the air, a prelude to both hope and apprehension. Jack's heart leaped at the thought, a shimmering light illuminating the shadows that had threatened him for so long. Then we rise with them, he responded, his conviction radiating through his words. But as they turned to engage with the audience, Jack could feel the weight of unresolved tension hovering. Chris watching intently, ready to pounce on the faintest sign of weakness. Jack had turned a corner, but now he had to navigate the treacherous terrain of his past while forging new pathways in the present. The night was young, and so were their aspirations, but the battle against the lingering doubts was far from over. Jack realized they were only on the cusp of a new chapter, a daunting yet thrilling expedition ahead. What awaited them in this uncharted territory? An unmistakable sense of urgency electrified the atmosphere, kindling hope and igniting the need to confront whatever challenges lay ahead. Jack stood at the edge of the stage, the applause slowly fading into whispers. He could feel the heat of the spotlight, a reminder of the moment he had just seized. The high from sharing his truths coursed through him like a drug. But that exhilaration was quickly chased by a creeping anxiety as he recalled Chris's skeptical face. Would this brave unveiling truly resonate, or had he merely danced on the surface, oblivious to the depth of judgment thematically lurking? Turning to Emma, he caught a flicker of doubt in her expression. "What now?" she asked softly, a note of uncertainty creeping into her words. Jack hesitated, feeling the pressure of expectation settle once more on his shoulders. "Now we wait," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. But inside, he recoiled from the very notion of passivity, requiring action if they sought true affirmation. The crowd gradually dissipated, but Jack remained rooted in place. Perhaps it was fear, perhaps ambition. He couldn't discern which one compelled him forward into the sea of strangers. He needed more than mere acceptance. He craved understanding, an acknowledgement of the difference he hoped to make. As he skimmed the remnants of the audience, his eyes landed on Chris still seated, the shadow of evaluation etched in his demeanor. Jack swallowed hard, understanding that to truly grow, he had to confront his adversary, even if it meant risking the remnants of his confidence. "Chris," Jack approached, his tone unexpectedly firm. "We need to talk about what we presented today." Chris raised an eyebrow, folding his arms in a way that felt disapproving, defensive. "You really think you've created something substantial? This is just one speech, Jack. It doesn't mean anything if it doesn't translate into results." Jack felt the sting of criticism pierce through his bravado. "You're right. I've only just scratched the surface," he conceded, but determination filled the gaps of his uncertainty. "But if we don't take that leap, we may never discover what we can truly achieve. This is about more than just metrics. It's about building something real." For every ounce of doubt Chris emitted, Jack countered with the strength of his newfound conviction. This wasn't merely about the project. It was about personal transformation, both for him and the people they aimed to inspire. For a moment, Jack caught a glimpse of understanding behind Chris's authoritative facade. A fleeting acknowledgement, but it was enough to ignite an idea within Jack. He didn't need to convince Chris outright. He had to illustrate the greater concept behind their venture. "What if we hosted a workshop?" he suggested, heart pounding but resolute. A space for unguarded expression, painting not only our ideas, but providing a platform for others to take those leaps. Together, we could legitimize our brand by showcasing real experiences. What do you think? Chris remained silent, searching Jack's expression for traces of insecurity to exploit. But Jack felt fortified, grounded by his urgency to act. If he could show Chris that risk could lead to tangible experiences, perhaps he could quell the pervasive shadows of self-doubt that lingered in every aspect of their operation. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, and finally, Chris spoke. "A workshop. It sounds ambitious," he admitted slowly, measuring the weight of his words. "But if it fails, then we learn," Jack asserted, the intensity in his gaze anchored by passionate resolve. "Failure doesn't bind us. Discomfort fosters growth. If we embrace the possibility of slipping, we set our footing for flight." Chris's scrutiny deepened, yet Jack could sense the subtle shift, an inkling of intrigue igniting within his opponent. "You have potential, Jack," Chris finally said, surrendering the weight of disapproval. "But don't confuse your drive for wisdom." He sighed, the tension loosening, albeit slightly. "Let's see what you can pull off." Jack stepped back. The air rang with exhilaration at what the next step would unleash. This was a newfound boldness, a challenge now interwoven within the fabric of his purpose. Yet, beneath the excitement thrummed a different query. What if the ability to foster change hinged not only on risks he took, but on the way he navigated the existing hierarchy that threatened to stifle them? As he regrouped with Emma, she sensed the shift and beamed with enthusiasm, eyes sparkling with possibility. But the lingering doubts clinging to Jack were not yet extinguished. He had opened the door to a new opportunity, a workshop where the exchange of ideas could cultivate growth. But now he questioned whether he could actually transcend the remnants of his past failures and craft a successful platform. "Are you ready to meet this challenge head-on?" Emma asked, determination glimmering through her uncertainty. Jack inhaled deeply, preparing for the journey that lay ahead. "We're about to dive into uncharted waters," he affirmed, the implications of that commitment settling in his bones. And with that, they would need to confront their toughest challenge yet, defining not just their project, but their own identities in the face of the very risks that had previously restrained them. What would it take to rise in the eyes of their critics, to convert doubts into confidence, and to forge a future they had once merely imagined? The real journey, it seemed, was just beginning. Jack felt a pulse of determination as he and Emma walked away from the stage. The echoes of applause still hummed in his ears, but beneath that lay the hum of anxiety that lingered, a low vibration heralding the hurdles ahead. "Let's sketch out the details," he said, as a surge of adrenaline propelled his thoughts into action. They settled at a nearby cafe, the warmth of the environment contrasting sharply with the icy grip of doubt that threatened to envelop him. Jack scribbled notes, envisioning an inviting atmosphere for their workshop, one that would encourage genuine expression. Emma leaned in, her brow furrowing. "But what if no one shows up? What if they don't connect with what we're trying to create?" "Then we keep pushing forward," he replied, frustration flecking through. He studied her worried expression and tempered his approach. "Look, we're venturing into a space where vulnerability is crucial. If we don't provide that platform, we'll never know the potential of our work, and more importantly, neither will they." There was a fierceness in Jack now. He realized that every challenge clarified his vision further. He had spent too much time sidelined by uncertainty to allow fear to dictate the course of their journey. As the cafe bustled around them, he could see possibilities unfurling, myriad stories threading together within the community they aimed to engage. It felt different this time, like a feeling of latent power surged below the surface of his aspirations. "I can help you set up a social media campaign," Emma offered, her excitement growing as Jack's conviction resonated with her. "We'll need to reach people, draw them in." "Yes," Jack exclaimed, the image of their workshop blossoming in vivid detail. Their plans shifted from abstract sketches to tangible forms in his mind. "We'll spotlight the attendees and their stories. Let's create a theme that's inviting, like Voices Unbound or something." "Both powerful and inclusive," Emma agreed, a spark igniting in her eyes. Yet as they pored over logistics and the ideal format for their workshop, Jack felt a subtle flicker of doubt worm its way back into his thoughts. What if Chris's skepticism had a kernel of truth? He had faced failures before, and the thought of falling short loomed like a storm cloud overshadowing his enthusiasm. Days turned into weeks as they engaged in a whirlwind of planning. They reached out to potential speakers who had inspiring stories, crafted engaging marketing material, and designed a flow for the day. Jack thrived on this newfound momentum. Each completed task reinforced a major lesson. Taking initiative could foster belief, not just in their mission, but in himself as well. But with every dawn came reminders of his insecurities. He stood at the office window one day, watching the city pulse below, a network of lives interwoven, each heart bearing its struggles and triumphs. Would their efforts resonate amid the cacophony of noise around them? In that moment, he received a message from Chris. "Let's schedule a meeting. I want to discuss your workshop." The weight of uncertainty fell heavy on his shoulders. Jack's hands trembled slightly as he considered the implications. This was a pivotal moment, one in which he could invite critique into the structure he had built, the very core of his emerging identity. What would Chris think? Could he dismantle their efforts with a few harsh words? Emma sensed his shifting demeanor and put a comforting hand on his arm. "Remember why you started this. You're ready." Jack took a breath. Confidence was a foreign terrain, but perhaps it was time to navigate it. "We can do this," he said, more for himself than for her. He recognized that every conversation with Chris could be a doorway either to validation or self-doubt. Yet there was an underlying thrill in his chest. The prospect of having his ideas scrutinized meant he was in the game, that he had reached far beyond the safe confines of mere speech. As the appointed time approached, he wrestled with conflicting thoughts. Would he emerge fortified in his vision, or would he wither under the weight of criticism? The response to his workshop would not just reflect their ambition, but would challenge the very fabric of who he had become. The stakes had never felt higher. He was stepping far into the uncertainty, not just of success, but of his own evolution. Jack breathed deep, preparing for the inevitable confrontation, knowing that whether he faltered or soared, it was his resilience that would ultimately define the journey ahead. What kind of battle would unfold in that meeting, and what truths awaited him just beneath the surface? The day of the workshop arrived, and anticipation hung thick in the air. Jack stood in front of the venue, absorbing the cacophony of voices and laughter echoing inside. The mingling crowd felt unfamiliar yet exhilarating. Gone were the shadows of self-doubt that had clouded his decisions. Today was a testament to the change he had embraced. As Emma joined him at the entrance, she radiated confidence. "We're ready for this," she declared, her eyes sparkling with conviction. Jack felt a rising tide of determination to prove not only to her, but more importantly to himself, that he had transformed from the man who merely chased profit into someone capable of forging meaningful connections with others. They stepped inside, the room buzzing with energy. Participants milled about, exchanging ideas and sharing stories, their faces alight with curiosity. This was a vibrant marketplace of creativity, each individual presenting their unique perspectives, echoing the very essence of what he hoped to cultivate, a community of unbound voices. Jack and Emma took to the makeshift stage to welcome the attendees. Jack's heart raced as he took the microphone, fine-tuning his focus, allowing the excitement swirling within him to fortify his resolve. This was his moment, a culmination of every step he had taken to break free from the chains of apathy and privilege. "Welcome to Voices Unbound," he announced, his voice steady and resounding. "Today, we are not just celebrating art, but the stories that breathe life into it. Each of you holds something precious and valuable to share, and together we can create an influential tapestry of expression." With each word, he felt the remnants of his past, fear and doubt dissipate, replaced by an affirmation of purpose. Emma stood beside him, her proud smile encouraging him to keep going. As the workshop progressed, participants engaged in discussions, shared ideas, and exchanged contact information, creating networks of support. Jack marveled at the emotional resonance unfolding around him, each interaction a testament to the collaboration he envisioned. This wasn't merely a networking event, it was an awakening. As the discussions wrapped up, Jack noticed Chris watching from a distance, arms crossed, skepticism etched across his face. But this time, rather than feeling threatened, he felt invigorated. "Let's be honest," Jack said, addressing the group as a whole. "This isn't just about the art we create, it's about the relationships we foster and the futures we empower. We may stumble along the way, but we have to lean into our vulnerability." "Exactly," Emma chimed in. "Let's create bonds that last beyond this workshop, that inspire and transcend every challenge." Their words ignited a spark that resonated throughout the audience. One participant stood up, a young woman whose voice trembled with both excitement and fear. "I've always dreamed of sharing my art, but never felt worthy enough. Today shows me we're all part of a larger story." Tidal waves of applause followed, an affirmation of everything Jack had fought for. Every instance of emotional authenticity reinforced his commitment to this new identity. He had stepped beyond the superficial requirements of success and emerged into a realm where connection reigned supreme. After the workshop ended, Jack finally approached Chris. Tension gripped the air as the two men faced each other, the battleground of ideas set before them. "Impressive work, Jack," Chris said begrudgingly, his expression revealing a begrudging respect. "I realize this isn't just about profit margins, it's about what we can actually create together." Jack felt the weight of validation wash over him. He'd conquered not only the doubts within himself, but also the skepticism of his past relationships. He had emerged transformed, earning recognition not just as a businessman, but as a collaborator and creator. "I appreciate that, Chris," Jack replied with conviction. "But this is only the beginning. We need to foster this community, cultivate these relationships into something sustainable. It's about a better future, for them and for us." The glimmer of mutual respect settled between them as they began to talk of tangible next steps. Jack left the workshop that day, an overwhelming sense of satisfaction swelling within him. He had not only realized his vision, but had forged a path of empowerment for others, breathing life into dreams that were yearning for expression. He had metamorphosed into someone who demonstrated competence and empathy, redefining success through shared pursuits and meaningful connections. His heart surged with newfound confidence as he replayed Emma's earlier remark in his mind. What if this was just the beginning? Today had been about collective triumph, and it was both exciting and daunting. Jack Turner was no longer simply a millionaire in pursuit of financial achievements. He had emerged as a key player in a narrative that embraced creativity, vulnerability, and the power of community. The journey ahead glistened with infinite possibilities, and he was ready to embrace each challenge that came his way. This was his moment of freedom, a defining chapter rewritten. Now, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and support our growth. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. and share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.